when I speak publicly, I get nervous when people are back because it just seems like it goes on forever. And part of how I deal with that, because sometimes it's unavoidable, is I just imagine that I'm in a coffee shop at a table, sipping some coffee with my friends talking about Jesus, and that helps. So you don't have to do anything, but if you want to make me uncomfortable, move further back. And if you want me to be comfortable, move further forward. And I'll leave it up to the prompting of the Spirit as to what he needs you to do. So welcome, everybody. We're going to have a series of short teachings tonight. And this first one is going to have a little bit of a teaching and then a little bit of a workshop. And all of it is around the theme of knowing Jesus. You'll have to correct me. I tell you what, why don't each speaker just say the topic of what they're talking about? I'm talking about knowing Jesus in your personal walk, and specifically a very important either habit or discipline of how to do that. Dan, you're talking about
connecting with God in community.
Very good. And Mike, you're
Connecting with God that goes outside of the church. So it's all about connecting with God.
That's right. And then Bob's going to end us with some really cool thoughts from Isaiah.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah, beautiful. Just a second. So, who am I? I'm Andrew. I've known Jesus. Well, I professed Christ when I was 6 years old. I met Jesus when I was 13 years old. I was at a teen retreat. I don't remember almost anything about the time other than that was the day that I realized everything I've been taught growing up in a Christian family wasn't just teachings, but that Jesus himself and God himself was actually very real. I remember being terrified. I remember being humiliated. And then I remember being entirely in awe of this creator of the universe who, I don't know why at the moment, but for some reason was interested in interacting with me. So I went and sat under an oak tree, a big, beautiful, gnarled beast of a tree for probably about an hour and a half, which is the longest I had ever sat down in my life at that point. And because I was a hyper energetic kid. And I just basked in the presence of the Lord. And I decided then and there that whatever happens the rest of my life, I want to know this individual who calls himself God. And that's been the path of my life. And I've had a ton of ups and downs. But at this point, I can tell you that I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I am far from perfect, just like every follower of Jesus Christ. Thankfully, it doesn't depend on me. Following depends on him and setting the example that he gives us. And I believe that if the entire world was to follow Jesus, the teachings of Jesus, the attitudes of Jesus, I think most, if not all, of the problems of this world would go away. We might still have natural disasters. We might still have all sorts of stuff like that. But you know how the world would respond to those things? Generous, loving, immediate support. I think that all of the racial inequalities of this world would disappear if we all believed and followed the teachings of Jesus. I believe that everyone would live a lifestyle of generosity so that the needs of everyone would be met. It would be wonderful. And that is part of what we endeavor to do as Christians, is to represent the teachings of Jesus and the person of Jesus to this world. Tonight, it's important for you to know that I believe that knowing Jesus is the best and most important thing that any human can do. That's a different teaching series. Let's just assume that for the sake of tonight. So I'm going to answer the question of how do we get to know Jesus? And that is another teaching series. So we're kind of starting with this big picture in a little bit. Now we're going in even more. And what we're talking about tonight is a specific way that I have found to be vital in our culture today. For probably every healthy Christian I'm aware of does this on some level. And most of you probably have ways of doing this that you may or not be aware of because this is part of how we're wired. And you may be asking, what is this? Well, thank you for asking. I'll tell you in a second. So first off, I just wanted to bring up a passage I was reading in Luke. Talks about how Jesus, 3 years of ministry on the earth, this guy was busy beyond belief. And every morning it said Jesus got up very early to pray and spend time with the Lord. Let's ask a question for a second. Why did Jesus do that? And I do want some answers. I'll take 2 answers. So there probably aren't many wrong ones. So throw out, why do you guys think Jesus got up early in the morning, which probably meant like 3 or 4, because he was doing stuff really early? Why did he do that? Why did he get up to spend time? He's the Son of God. He's God, so why would he spend time with Heavenly Father? Set the example, absolutely. That's 100% true. Let's get them. Oh, you stole my thunder. That's where I was going to go. I was going to say, it struck me the other day, I wonder if he did it because he wanted to. Because he wanted to. Right, that's what he's doing. He's going to commune with his Father. It's like, I guess Jesus liked the Father and loved the Father and wanted to spend the first part of his day with him. That's not that mind-blowing, but for me, I don't know. I feel like as a Christian, I can get really wrapped into, here's the things that I need to do to be healthy. And Jesus and God can kind of become more like a prescription that we take in this certain way to be healthy. And that's not entirely bad. I think there's some very good things about seeing Jesus as having the answers, so I should live my life in the way he prescribes. I think that's good. But I think all of that comes from a deeper place. We don't use Jesus to be healthy. We know Jesus because Jesus is awesome. And I love the guy, and I believe that if anyone is exposed to him, they'll have an opportunity to either pull back because he's kind of scary, honestly, or fall in love with him. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. Here's a question for us. Do you want to spend time with Jesus? This is a great question. And if you're like me, most of the time, I think the answer is probably something like, well, sometimes I do, or I don't really know if I do or not. I'm just kind of living my life. I haven't really thought about it too much. And as humans, I think we're designed by God to know him. I think that's a big part of why we're here on earth. So if we're designed by God to know him, and in my life, I look at myself and think, well, is that really what I want or what I prioritize in my day? I can safely say not as much as I should. And I can probably safely say for most of us, especially us youngsters, probably. And I have some reasons why that we're going to talk through in a minute, but we're going to look at one specific discipline or habit or principle of how to connect with Jesus a little bit better. And I kind of silly named it effective personal communication. But that's also known as personal time with Jesus. But what is personal time with Jesus? Just like Mike said, Jesus is communing with the Father. I think that's what we need to do. I think we need to talk to the guy and then listen to him. Yes, ma'am. Very good. That is actually point number 3 on my chart. So you are way ahead of the game. You already seeing the end of the tracks here. How do we talk with Jesus Christ? How do we hear from Jesus Christ? I think all of us who are Christians here could probably give some cookie-cutter answers here. We pray, we read the Bible. But really, do I actually experience talking and listening to the guy on a regular basis, where we feel the impact of that? Now I am. There have been whole portions of my life where I did not, honestly, and that's okay. It's part of growing. And I have 4 principles tonight that we're going to launch into. We don't have much more time to do more than this. I'd love to talk about this for hours. But 4 principles that I want to talk about that in our culture today, I think are vital to knowing Jesus. And I'm just going to give you a preview of what they are. I'm going to go into it. Principle number 1 is we need to process to silence. I'll explain what that means. Number 2 is we need to feel. Number 3 is we need to talk. And number 4 is we need to listen. If we follow these 4 principles, I have found that in my life, I connect with Jesus and people pray with Jesus. So let's start with the first one. What is this process to silence? Process is a matter of working through something. And silence is, this isn't silence, it's humming. How many of us in today's culture experience silence? Ever? There's a fascinating study that just came out. Do you guys know that the attention span of a 14-year-old kid today is one of the shortest attention spans ever seen? You know why? It's because our entire culture has gravitated to let's dump truck as much information as we possibly can on every person in America as often as we can without stop. Well, our brains cannot process all that information. If I Google something, if I pay attention, I don't even realize this is happening. So my brain has cycled it out. There are like 17 ads all over everywhere, tiny little things. But I see all of them. But guess what our brains have done? They have learned to just cycle it out and cycle it out. And that's good, because otherwise we all go crazy with the amount of information that we are inputting. But there's another great study out of guess what this does to your brain? It's spinning like a hamster constantly, absolutely constantly. It is so chock full of subliminal messages. We drive down the road here, we see hundreds of advertisements everywhere. There are cars that we interact with. There are people we interact with. We have so much information bombarding us constantly. And I am curious if our culture has really taught us how to process information. I thought about it. I don't know if I've ever been taught how to slow down and think, actually. I think in general, it's if we just impress them with enough stuff, they'll buy our stuff. So let's keep throwing things at them until they just subliminally are buying our things. And that works, which is why they keep doing it. If we want to hear from a God who does not speak audibly, it takes a lot of focus. And if we have crazy short attention spans and our heads are chocked full of all this stuff, we are not going to be successful. So we need to process through what's happening in our brains to return to silence. And for those of you who haven't done this, it's really fun until you've done it. And then you experience like, what was I doing? If you have never gone out on a week-long camping trip where you left everything, all your phones, all your ability to communicate, the first day is hell. It is awful because your brain is craving the input that it's gotten used to. And without that input coming in, it doesn't know what to do and it's going nuts. But if you're deliberate with it, you can hit a reset where your brain's like, oh, wait a second, I don't have to keep going at the speed I'm going, and it starts to slow down. Anyway, all that being said, silence, I think, is really hard to reach because we all have these. And I don't know about you guys, but I took a media fast with Tom Yang last week. And at the beginning of it, my hand would itch because I didn't have my phone to pull up and start playing a podcast or start playing like some YouTube videos to just listen as I was working. And I would like be working and then just find myself doing this. And I got rid of my phone for the week. I guarantee most of us young folks are in that same boat, because that is our culture today. And I want to be clear, I don't necessarily think that that's bad. I really don't. However, if we want to really have space to receive what Jesus has for us, we must settle down. And that's okay. So let me teach you how to settle down. And then doing so, you can be crazy busy for most of the day and then have a process to settle down, and you'll be able to hear and connect with Jesus. This is where it gets tricky because every person here is different. I settle down by coming home, making a pot of tea, pouring myself a pot of tea, going into a corner, closing the door. If I have to, I'll put on headphones and won't play anything, and I stare at a wall for 20 minutes. And I can hear stuff just popping into my brain, audibly almost, just like, ooh, and now there'll be these weird like commercials I heard 3 months ago or something. Like, where did that come from? But I stare at this wall and I leave all my electronics, I leave all my distractions, and I force myself to reset. Now I had to do this for hours because I was so locked into the sped up version, but I've gotten into a habit now where I can slow down by staring at it. You know what my good cousin Tom does is he goes out back and he builds a fire. He builds a fire, he gathers sticks, and by doing one thing, it slows him down. For me, if I do one thing, I I'm like, it's like a drug. I'll start doing one thing and I'll rehab back into doing like 15 things. I have to stop to go. But you don't necessarily. I know another person who goes and starts making pottery. Works for her like a charm. She's talking to God and singing in like 20 minutes doing pottery because something about creating settles her down and focuses her on what's important. So this is the tricky thing is I don't know what settles you down, but I do know that something does because God made you. And I would encourage you to discover it. Find out what you can do. I guarantee you it probably involves taking this, putting it somewhere out of your reach, getting away from input. That's a crucial principle. Get away from input and allow yourself to process what's happening. And eventually you'll get to a point where it settles down. But that's also a big part of why we don't settle down. Because guess what? When you settle down, often you start to feel things. And many of us spend most of our time, maybe not girls so much, you can talk about that, but I know a lot of guys who feeling things is like the end of the world. Because we know our brain has locked this away that if I really start to feel what I was feeling last week, it's going to be miserable. Guess what? You're right. It is going to be miserable. But here's the psychology truth that is also, I think, found in, I quote a lot of Proverbs and Psalms that you're already feeling that subconsciously. It's there. It's unprocessed. It is eating away at you. These unprocessed traumas, this pain, it's all there. You're carrying it around with you constantly. You're just not consciously aware of it. That's a whole nother seminar, which we would take days. So don't worry too much about that. I could recommend a couple of great scientific podcasts about it if you're interested, and some great books. So, long story short, I should say. Figure out what it is that I am feeling now that I've calmed down. And then talk to God about it. That's step 3. Don't just feel and stay there. That's horrible. There's nothing to do with it. You just get stuck. Tell God about it. David in the Psalms, God says to David, pour out your heart to me and see if I don't open the floodgates of blessing to you. The man is commanded by God, don't hold back. Whatever you are carrying is toxic, is violent, as vile as it might be. God already knows it, and he's asking you to give it to him. So tell him about it, which is another reason why getting away is important. It's not about you guys, but if I start telling God honestly about how I feel, I don't want other people to get around. That's another important thing of why getting away is part of this. And then once you have told God what you are feeling, guess what? I feel a lot better usually. Actually, not usually then. For me then, it's, okay, God, I've told you how I feel. Step 4, listen. What do you have to say to me? I was wrong. It's step 4, not step 3. Then I open my Bible and I start reading. And when I do, I say, Lord, what do you have for me right now? You know how I'm feeling. I just told you. You knew before I told you. But I'm ready to listen. And in doing so, I have heard and found, I was just reading in Luke when Jesus is in his hometown where he grew up. And I don't know why he does this. I'm still trying to figure this out. You guys, this is wild. The guy shares this passage from Isaiah, and all the people around him who know who he is and grew up with him are like, oh, he's so elegant. This is great. But he grew up with us. Should we really listen to him? And the dude just goes for the throat. He doesn't say anything nice or genial. He just says, hey, this is the reason why you guys aren't really God's chosen people and the kingdom's been given to other people. And they're so mad they pick him up and try to throw him off a cliff. Who does that? Apparently, Jews do back in those days. Now, here's the thing. Jesus could have said a bunch of stuff, but he just shanked them right where it counted, and they reacted by trying to kill him. Who does that? Jesus does. Why on earth would Jesus, why did he try to say it in a more winsome way? He didn't. And I want to be like Jesus. So as I was reading that, I just felt very clearly that, Andrew, you don't have to be ashamed of the truth. And maybe their reaction was exactly what they needed. Maybe people in that village afterwards were like, what did we just try to do? What just happened? And I bet a lot of them responded later in their lives. I don't know that, but there's a reason Jesus did that. So 4 principles in general. This is super short, but that's okay. Get rid of the input process to silence. Find a way for you where you can escape the constant bombardment of this world. Probably be alone, but different people do this differently. Process to silence. Feel what you're feeling. That's hard, but it's a lot easier when you don't have commercials running in the back of your brain. Tell God what you're feeling so you can emote it, get it out in some way, shape, or form, and then receive from God what He has. So this is our workshop questions, if you want to write them down. And I thought what we could do is, this is way too short of a time to really get into this adequately, but this is like a bookmark. It's like an introduction for you guys to start thinking about this. That's what these questions are intended to do. They're to start thinking and questioning, okay, how can I do this? Because I think knowing Jesus is the most important thing in the world. I think that our constant bombardment of information is preventing me from really knowing Jesus adequately. So I want to empty myself so I can hear from Him. I want to make space for Jesus in my heart. That's what I'm encouraging us to do. So question one, do I feel the desire to connect with Jesus on a regular basis? I hated that. I asked that 6 months ago and the answer was no. I was comfortable with what's you saying it. Do I feel the desire to connect with Jesus on a regular basis? The answer to that question will give you an idea of where you're at in your walk with the Lord. There's no wrong answer because everybody is on a journey here. If the answer is not at all, that's fine. Come to Jesus. If the answer is absolutely great, come to Jesus. That's what I would encourage you. Question two, what do I need to do to make room for processing the silence in my life? What do I need to do to make room? Just stop there. The rest of it is for processing to silence. What do I need to do to slow down? To get rid of it? And then the last one is, do I need help? I just want to warn you all now. I've done this for a while. A lot of people have done this for a while. They start to do this, things start coming up inside of us that we sometimes it can be a lot to handle. I'm talking mental issues. I'm talking past abuses that happened, stuff like that. You may be fine. I just want to encourage you all, don't be surprised when you really stop to take time to feel some things that are pretty overwhelming start coming up. I think that our culture has a backlog of years and years and years of neglecting this process. If you try to deal with it all at once, it can be like a flood of craziness. So do it, but be aware that you may need to get some help. That's what I would say. And don't be surprised if that turns out to be true. It's true for me. It's true for Tom, one of the godliest men I know. Really true for Tom. I shouldn't say that. It's more true for me than him. Those are the questions. So how do you want to do this? Should we break into small groups or should we do this solo? Okay, solo? I'm comfortable with that. How about you choose? If you want to ask this and write down some thoughts on your own, that's great. If you turn to the person next to you and they're like, with me, then that's great.
How many minutes would you like?